There are nights that mark us in a way that's impossible to forget. Nights when instinct screams, when our senses sharpen, and something in the air tells us we're about to cross an invisible line. Have you ever felt that? That sensation that, no matter how normal everything seems, something is wrong. Something we can't name right away, but becomes impossible to ignore. Since you're here, let me keep you company while you go about your daily tasks, tidying up the house, preparing a meal, or simply enjoying a moment of rest, disconnecting from your worries. If you can, put on your favorite headphones. Prepare a warm drink, or whichever you like best. And let's dive into today's episode. Story 1. It's only been a few months since it all happened, but I still get tense every time I remember that night. Good evening. My name is Marcos and I'm from New York. I've been working as a rideshare driver for over 2 years, and I've already been through plenty of strange situations. But nothing compares to what I'm about to tell you. If I hadn't lived it myself, I probably wouldn't believe half of it. I'm not the type who gets easily impressed. After all, I've had passengers yelling on the phone, people who got sick and vomited in the back seat, and even couples fighting so badly they almost started throwing punches in my car. But that rainy night, something very different happened. It felt like a premonition that I was in trouble before the passenger even got into the car. And I should have trusted that instinct. It was around 2 a.m. and the rain was falling so heavily that I could barely see the lane markings. My last passenger had just gotten out, and I seriously thought about closing the app and going home. But I decided to try one more ride. That's when I received a request from a hospital near downtown. Hospital rides in the middle of the night always make me uneasy, but I accepted without thinking too much. I was tired, but I needed the extra money. Anyone who works with Uber or other apps will understand me. When I got to the entrance, the place was practically deserted. Only a security guard at the gate stared at me suspiciously. Still, I waited a few minutes until I saw a man rushing out. He was wearing a torn shirt, dripping wet from the rain, and looked very agitated. He got into the car without saying a word, only staring at me through the rearview mirror with eyes that made me uncomfortable. When he sat in the back seat, I noticed a strange smell. Alcohol mixed with something else. I only realized later that it was dried blood. I wondered if he was injured or if he had just gone through some hospital procedure. I tried to start a conversation, asking if he was okay or if he needed help. But the only response I got were some incoherent sentences, spoken so low I could barely hear them. Do you believe guilt can be justified? Have you ever wondered if someone deserves to pay for what they did? Without even knowing what they did? The way he spoke was fragmented, but filled with an anguish that made my skin crawl. I started to feel anxious, glancing around, not knowing if I should drive him to his destination about 2 hours away, or call the police. But at the same time, I didn't want to make things worse. He clearly wasn't in his right mind. As we drove down the flooded avenue, I noticed the man trembling, squeezing his hands tightly together. At every red light, he looked around as if he were running from someone or something. The rain pounded hard on the roof, the sound mixing with thunder that lit up the inside of the car in a sinister way. I tried to stay calm, but my heart was racing and sweat dripped down my neck. At one point, he leaned forward and asked in a hoarse voice, "Do you think it's possible to atone for someone else's mistakes?" I was so confused it took me a few seconds to answer. All I could say was that I didn't understand what he meant. Then he gave me a twisted, almost desperate smile and murmured that there was no more time. That's when my perception of reality began to completely distort. I kept driving, hands trembling on the wheel, trying to focus through the heavy rain. The man remained restless, shifting in the back seat, letting out long, desperate sighs. I tried to ignore the strong smell of alcohol and blood, but it was unbearable, making me nauseous. Every now and then he continued muttering incoherent phrases, as if talking to someone who wasn't there. My heart pounded at every red light, every deserted corner, and I could only pray nothing stranger would happen. Then suddenly, he asked if I believed in fate, if I thought some people were born marked for evil. My voice almost broke as I answered that I wasn't sure. But I didn't think anyone was born completely condemned. He let out a muffled laugh and said there were sins that not even time could erase. I tried to think of a way to end the ride without drawing his attention, but I couldn't plan anything coherent. At some point, He asked me to stop at a dark corner near an abandoned building. A chill ran down my spine, but I obeyed, swallowing hard as I parked under the weak glow of a streetlight. He looked at me through the rearview mirror and whispered that he needed to grab something there, but didn't say what. For a few seconds, I was frozen. That's when I realized this situation was completely out of control. Then he opened the door slowly, looking around like a cornered animal, and stepped out into the pouring rain. The moment he shut the door, I didn't wait even 5 seconds before flooring the gas. Yes, I needed the money, but I'd be a fool to risk my life for it. I sped away without looking in the mirror. I didn't want to. I couldn't. My hands were still shaking and questions swirled in my head. What was he doing at that abandoned building? Why did he talk about guilt and all those things? And above all, why the hell didn't I call the police? When I finally got home, all I felt was the weight of it all. I tried to sleep, but it was useless. I woke up several times after nightmares. The smell of blood still lingered in my mind, and his voice kept echoing with those incoherent phrases. Phrases that now seemed to make sense, and yet none at all. The next day, I tried to live as if nothing had happened. But every honk, every loud noise reminded me. I thought about calling someone, telling them everything. But what if they thought I was crazy? Or worse, what if it got me involved in something much bigger than I could handle? Deep down, I just wanted to forget. But I couldn't. 2 days later, I stopped at a gas station. While waiting inside the convenience store, I saw a news report on TV about a man who had disappeared from the hospital that very night. They said he already had a troubled history, a serious accident, the death of a family member, and in recent weeks, suicidal behavior. The police suspected he had run away or had a breakdown. They even mentioned someone had seen him near an abandoned building in a dark part of the city. My stomach turned. It was him. It had to be him. And suddenly, everything made sense. He hadn't talked about guilt for nothing. At that moment, I felt my chest tighten. Could I have done something? Helped him? Or maybe if I had, it would have been my name in the newspapers instead. The truth, as much as it hurts to admit, is that fear won. And maybe that was a good thing. I don't know if I would have made it out alive otherwise. I guess that's it. Being a driver means being exposed to strange people almost every day. Before we move on to the next story, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss the upcoming ones. Your presence is important and your support is essential. Well then, let's continue. Story 2. It's been about 6 months since I bought a small house in Plattsburgh. At the time, I just wanted a quiet place, closer to nature, far from the rush of the big city where I used to live. I'm not one to get caught up in superstitions or imagine supernatural things. I thought 1,000 times before writing this, afraid of sounding crazy or exaggerated. Still, I need to get this weight off my chest. I hope whoever listens can understand what happened, and maybe tell me if they've ever gone through something similar. My name is Mariana. I'm 32 years old and I'm an art teacher. When I bought the house, I had just gone through a separation. I wanted to start over somewhere peaceful, where I could breathe fresh air and paint without so many distractions. I've never been the type to care much about small-town gossip. But as soon as I moved, I noticed the neighbors were very curious about who I was and why I had moved there. One man in particular, Mr. Antonio, who lived nearby, showed up in the first few days to introduce himself. He seemed friendly, but there was a heaviness in his demeanor, as if he was always on the verge of revealing some important secret. At first, the conversation was polite. He asked where I came from, if the move had gone smoothly, the usual small talk. But when I told him I planned on spending a lot of time alone, he gave me a strange look. Then he said something cryptic that unsettled me immediately. I thought maybe he was warning me about some ordinary noise in the area, wild animals, or strong winds in the woods. But his tone was different, serious, ominous. Don't trust everything you hear at night around here. Miss, he said. After that, he left me alone without further explanation. That sentence gave me instant chills. I didn't know whether to laugh it off or take it seriously. I just nodded and said goodbye. I figured maybe he was exaggerating. But it wouldn't take long before I realized otherwise. That week, it rained heavily. One night, a storm hit hard, one of those frightening ones. I've always loved the sound of rain on the roof. It usually brings me peace, but that night felt different. It was past midnight, and I couldn't sleep because of the thunder and lightning. That's when I heard footsteps, coming from the attic, directly above my bedroom. At first, I thought it was just the wooden beams creaking from the storm, but the sounds were too rhythmic, like someone walking up there. The worst part was, as far as I knew, that part of the house was completely empty. No furniture, nothing that could make those kinds of noises. I couldn't sleep the rest of the night. I just curled up in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to ignore the sounds moving from one side to the other. Around 4 a.m., everything went silent. When morning finally came, I got up with my heart racing and went straight to check the attic. I wanted to find the source of the noises. To my surprise, there was nothing out of place. No loose boards, nothing fallen. Only a strong smell of dust rising when I stepped on the old wooden floor. The thick layer of dust seemed untouched, except for a set of barefoot footprints. They were clear, well-defined, as if someone had really walked there with no shoes. At first, I thought maybe it was an animal, but the shape was human. The strangest detail: the footprints simply ended in the middle of the attic, as if the person had vanished into thin air. No trail leading to a window, no exit. I froze, a chill running down my back as I tried to process it. I went back downstairs with a knot in my throat and took a hot shower to calm down. But my thoughts wouldn't stop. I kept remembering Mr. Antonio's words, wondering why he had warned me like that. Had he already known something about this house? As the water ran, I tried to think of logical explanations, but every hypothesis left me more confused and more afraid. Don't trust everything you hear at night. Those words echoed in my head non-stop. The more I thought about them, the more convinced I became that something strange was going on. I decided I needed to talk to Mr. Antonio as soon as possible. He was the only one who could give me a clue about what was happening. As soon as I got dressed, I walked to his house, about 3 streets away. The path was peaceful, with spaced-out houses and a beautiful view of the mountains. Even so, I felt a heaviness in my chest, an unease that didn't match the serene landscape. Each step felt slower, as if I were pushing my own fear ahead of me. When I got to his house, I knocked and waited. No answer. I waited several minutes but heard nothing inside. I thought about asking a passerby, but he just shrugged. At the corner store, people said they didn't know where he was either. The old man disappears sometimes, they told me. That answer brought me no comfort. Frustrated, I went back home, now even more worried, unsure if I really wanted to uncover the truth behind those attic footsteps. That night, another storm came. Just as strong as the first, I locked myself in my room, turned on a lamp, and tried to read to distract my mind. But as soon as the lightning began to crackle in the sky, the footsteps returned. This time, they sounded even more rhythmic, like 2 or 3 people walking around up there. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my neck. I held my phone in my hand, but I didn't have the courage to call the police and explain such a bizarre story. I took deep breaths, trying to stay calm while the footsteps went back and forth, louder and louder. It was impossible to pretend it was just wood creaking. After long minutes, the noise finally stopped. The next day, by coincidence or not, I saw Mr. Antonio on the street. He looked even more serious than before. I told him what had been happening, practically begging to know if he was aware of any story about that house. He hesitated, looked around nervously, and then gave me an answer that made my stomach turn. Too many people have lost their minds in that house, girl. If I were you, I'd pray those noises are only in your head. I tried to press him for more details, but he just said goodbye and walked away. His few words were enough to rob me of sleep. It was the strangest warning anyone had ever given me. I froze, my mind overflowing with questions. But he turned his back and left me to figure things out alone. Back at home, that warning kept echoing in my head. I wandered through the rooms for a long time, searching for signs of another presence. But everything seemed normal. When I went back to the attic, the barefoot prints were gone, or maybe covered by another layer of dust. But this time, I felt it. A strong sensation that someone was standing behind me, watching. When I turned around, nothing. Since then, I've been sleeping on the couch in the living room. There, the noises are softer, less frequent. I'm too scared to face the upstairs again. To this day, I don't know if the footsteps I hear are real or just in my mind. But something tells me Mr. Antonio knows more than he let on. And worst of all, I'm not even sure I can trust my own ears anymore. If you're enjoying these stories, don't forget to leave a like. It's really important. Well, let's continue. Story 3. Good evening. My name is Marcelo, and I want to share something that happened to me about 6 months ago during a trip I took to the interior of Texas. I remember every detail because, even today, I can't drive at night without glancing at the rearview mirror every minute. I usually avoid talking about this because I'm terrified people will think I'm crazy, but maybe someone who's been through something similar will understand what I'm saying. I feel like only by telling this story will I be able to sleep peacefully again. It all started on a Friday night while I was driving back home after visiting my mother. She had recently undergone surgery, and I decided to spend a few days with her. The dashboard clock read a little after 11 p.m., and the road was completely deserted. Halfway through the drive, my phone rang. The screen didn't show any number, which instantly gave me a bad feeling. I thought maybe it was a relative calling from a public phone or something. I answered. The voice on the other end was calm, almost cold. The first thing it said was, "Are you sure your car is in good condition?" It was strange. It sounded like a genuine question, but who calls at that hour to ask something like that? I tried to respond with, "Who is this?" But the person simply repeated that it would be better for me to pull over and check if everything was okay. I felt a lump in my chest. I don't know if it was intuition or the voice somehow sounded familiar, but I got a very bad feeling. So I pulled onto the shoulder, grabbed my phone's flashlight, and quickly checked the tires, the oil, the engine. Everything seemed fine. The road was only illuminated by my headlights and the occasional car passing by. A cold wind made me shiver from head to toe. Relieved that nothing was wrong, I got back in the car and tried to call back. But it only went to voicemail. I spent a few minutes thinking whether I should keep driving or turn back to find a 24-hour gas station, but I couldn't see any in the area. The road was very isolated, so I decided to keep going. I was almost convincing myself it was some kind of prank call when my phone rang again. It was the same voice, but now it sounded pleased that I had stopped. It said something like, "You just passed a sign for a bridge, didn't you? Soon you'll see an old gas station. It's abandoned. Be careful." At that moment, panic hit me. I had just passed a sign indicating a bridge ahead, and I had heard about an old decommissioned gas station a few miles down that road. My heart raced. I checked the mirrors, trying to see if any car was following me, but there wasn't a single soul on that road. I asked again who it was and how they knew where I was, but all I heard was a low chuckle and an unsettling silence. That feeling of being watched kept growing. It's not every day someone seems to know exactly where you are, especially when there's no one else around. I decided to slow down to see if any car appeared behind me, but I was still completely alone. I thought about calling the police, but my phone signal began to flicker, and I couldn't complete any call. I tried turning on the radio to distract myself, but all I got was static, a static that somehow made me even more nervous. Then the voice called again. I answered, desperate for an explanation. "You still haven't figured it out, have you?" "It's not the car that has a problem." My anxiety spiked. I stayed silent, unsure how to respond. The road was getting darker with fewer and fewer streetlights. I refused a few calls out of sheer panic. But when I finally mustered the courage to answer again, all I heard was static, a harsh grating noise. The call didn't hang up, but there was no voice, just that irritating sound. I looked at the screen. It still showed the call as active. After several seconds of pure silence, the call ended by itself. But the worst part? Even with the car radio turned off, it began to tune itself to a strange frequency. I don't know if it was just my imagination, but I had the clear sense of hearing a breathing sound. Matching my own, I held my breath and it stopped. Then suddenly, another heavier breathing sound layered over mine, as if someone else were sharing the same airspace with me. I glanced at the back seat, completely terrified, but saw nothing. The suffocating feeling of not being alone filled the car. By reflex, I slammed the brakes, stopping almost in the middle of the lane. I pulled over again, trying to calm my breathing and check the car once more. As you can imagine, there was no one inside, but I swear I felt a presence. The radio kept hissing, alternating between my breathing and that second unknown one. I tried speaking. "Is someone here?" But my voice came out weak, almost a whisper. That's when the dashboard lights flickered for a split second. In the reflection of the windshield, I thought I saw a silhouette in the passenger seat. I turned quickly, but it was empty. My heart was pounding so hard I could only think about getting the hell out of there and finding a populated area. I kept driving, my hands slick with sweat on the wheel, barely blinking. Soon I saw the old gas station, the one with rusted pumps that had clearly been closed for years. Still, it felt safer to stop there than continue on that deserted road. I pulled over, turned off the engine, and was met with an overwhelming silence. I grabbed my phone, no signal. I turned on the radio, more static, but now the hiss seemed to come from behind my seat, like some bizarre mechanical interference. I gathered my courage and stepped out of the car, lighting the interior with my phone's flashlight. Nothing. I sat back down, locked the doors, and tried to steady myself. That's when the phone rang again. Same unknown number. My hands trembling, I answered. For a few moments, all I heard was a faint hiss, like someone breathing right into the microphone. Then a whisper, "Look at the back seat." I turned my head, but of course there was nothing I could see. The voice continued though, sounding almost amused by my terror. "You can't see it, but it's there." I didn't think twice. I hung up, turned the ignition, and sped out of that gas station. The radio kept hissing, but I didn't dare touch it. I just wanted to get home. I drove for another 30 minutes until I saw the lights of a town ahead. As soon as I reached civilization, open stores, movement, I pulled into a diner, bought some water, and tried to recover from the scare. Only then did the calls stop. To this day, I have no explanation. Maybe it was someone trying to scare me. Maybe it was something beyond what I can understand. Do I believe in the supernatural now? Let's just say, after that night, I don't rule anything out anymore. Before we move on to the last story, if you're still here, comment the time you're watching this. I love knowing who sticks with the stories until the end. Story 4. This happened just a few days ago while I was working as a delivery rider during the night shift. The situation was so strange that no matter how much I try to find a logical explanation, there's always something left that doesn't add up. My name is Andre, and I've been working as a delivery rider for about 3 years. I usually work overnight because it pays better. There are fewer competitors, especially with 24-hour restaurants. That week, I was doing extra shifts because I needed money to pay for my bike's maintenance. On a Thursday, it was already past midnight when the app rang. It was an order from a restaurant that usually gets a lot of traffic at night, so I didn't think much of it. The payment had already been processed online, which made things easier. One less thing to worry about. I picked up the order and checked the address. It was in a neighborhood a bit far from the city center, darker with little movement at that hour. I had been there before, but only during the day, never at night. As I rode closer, the atmosphere felt completely different. Almost no one on the streets, just silence broken by the hum of my bike. When I finally reached the address, I noticed the house looked empty. Windows closed, no car in the driveway, no lights inside. I thought maybe I had typed the wrong address into the GPS. But after checking again, it was correct. I rang the doorbell, unsure, and to my surprise, someone answered almost immediately. Not the delay of someone waking up. It was instant. Through the small crack in the door, I saw only a calm face with no real expression. The man asked me to leave the food on the ground without even opening the gate. I found it odd, but I followed his instructions, placing the package against the wall near the door. Before leaving, I asked if he could rate me 5 stars, the usual request we riders make to boost our reputation on the app. The man stood still for a moment, staring at me with a blank expression. Then he opened the door just a little more. That's when I managed to peek inside. It was pitch dark, but faint light from deeper in the house revealed a completely empty hallway. No furniture, no decorations, nothing on the walls. Not even a chair. It was the kind of sight that makes you instantly feel something isn't right. But I didn't know what to say or do, so I just stood there, waiting for him to respond. He let out a breath as if he was about to say something, but closed his mouth and turned his head away, like he was struggling to speak but couldn't. The silence turned heavy, almost suffocating. I had this strong sense that I shouldn't be there, that it would be safer to just get on my bike and leave. But my curiosity kept me frozen for a few more seconds, waiting to understand. Eventually, I shrugged it off, climbed onto my bike, and left. On the way back, the streets felt even darker and quieter. I thought maybe it was just some prank, some twisted joke. After all, as a delivery rider, I've been through plenty of weird situations. Nothing surprises me much anymore. But when I stopped at a traffic light, I decided to check the app to confirm everything was fine. That's when everything fell apart. The order simply wasn't there. It had vanished from my history, as if it had never existed. I tried refreshing the page, restarted the app, but nothing showed up. It was like the order never happened. The strange thing was that all my other deliveries from that night were still there, normal. Only that one had disappeared. I felt a tightness in my chest I couldn't explain. I tried telling myself it was some glitch in the system, but then I realized if the order wasn't registered, it meant I wouldn't get paid for it. The weirdest part? Everything had been confirmed beforehand. Even the address was saved on my GPS. It disappeared from the app, but it was still there in my phone's navigation history. Every mile I rode back, my mind kept racing. What was that house? Why did the man answer so quickly? Who paid for the order if it didn't exist in the system? To this day, I can't explain it. But every time I remember that door opening and that dark, empty hallway, I get chills down my arms, and honestly, I don't know if I'll ever have answers. Hey everyone, thanks for listening. Click the notification bell so you don't miss any future narrations. I post new videos every week. I hope to see you in the next ones.